Hello, everyone. I'm James Twyman, and I'm so happy that you're back with us for the Mystics Summit. We've been having some incredible sharings and interviews, and I'm very excited about the one that we are about to share. A dear friend of mine, Miranda McPherson, who is a contemporary spiritual teacher, interfaith minister, musician, and she's the author of The Way of Grace, The Transforming Power of Ego Relaxation. Such a fascinating topic, ego relaxation. She's known around the world for her depth of presence and refined capacity to guide people into the direct experience of the sacred. So, Miranda, I'm so happy to have you. Welcome to the summit.
Yeah, hi Jimmy, and it's really great to be here with you. And what a wonderful conference, whole summit on mystics. I mean that really rocks my boat. So I'm really glad to be here with you.
Yes, I am as well. And as you and I know, we've known each other for over 20 years. We go way back to the English days. It sounds kind of funny. We go way back to England through our study and our friendship through A Course in Miracles. And it has been such a beautiful gift to watch you as you've blossomed in such a beautiful way. And you've integrated so much more. I don't even know how to describe it. You've brought together so many vital elements that have always been so fully present within you, and now you're sharing them throughout the whole world. So why don't you give people just a little bit of background of how this particular subject of grace
Hmm.
into your life and why it's something that you're so passionate about?
Yeah. Well, I think for me personally, the whole understanding of what grace is has been, if there's one word that really encapsulates my whole journey, in all of its diversity, as you say. I grew up in Australia. I moved to England in my early 20s. I trained in interfaith ministry, was asked by my teacher to lead and create a whole seminary that the likes of which never existed before in Europe, and did that for 10 years. And then, that all kind of came to an end through an awakening I had in the cave that was once the home of the great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi. And then all the years of inner work and psychological unpacking and integration. I mean, I just see, if there's one word that encapsulates the entirety of what I've experienced and come to know, it's grace. But grace is an interesting word because it's a word that many of us use to encapsulate something that isn't really a thing, that is profoundly subtle and utterly transformational. And most of people think the word grace just means blessing, which it is. But I've kind of come to see that what grace really is divine presence coming alive in our experience. So it really is what mysticism is all about. But that paradoxically, what often seems to be most subtle and mystical is what I've found to be the most practical for transforming our suffering into wisdom, helping us to be real and true human beings, and helping us to walk the spiritual path with depth and substance in a way that helps us to be fully in this world, not avoiding anything the ordinary world brings forth, but to relate to it from a place inside that is not of this world. So I've come to see that grace has four primary dimensions to it, ways that it comes alive. And what most people don't often see or understand is that grace is the foundation of existence. When you really look at how did you get to be here? Like, how did you get to love the people that you love? Like, how come nature is the way it is? How come everything, when you really look, even just from a scientific lens, at reality, life, it is profoundly miraculous, profoundly interconnected and intelligent, and that we are all being birthed into existence by this. We could call that God, but a lot of people don't like to use that term, although I have no problem with it. But really, it's like the fact that we get to exist at all is an unfolding of what I call the ground of grace. And so when we really start to open to that, there's a capacity to actually let go deeply, to surrender out of trying to walk the spiritual path just conceptually with our mind. We can let real surrender happen because we can feel, oh my God, I'm in and part of something that always is, that is unfolding everything, including myself. We see the second dimension of grace is what I call the blessings of grace. And then that's the way most people think of grace, of like, sunlight coming through clouds and this feeling of a divine presence that shepherds us through life, a sense of being loved and accompanied by forces that we might not be able to name, but that we feel them anyway. And I'm sure everyone who's listening can look at their own life and see, wow, there was a moment where we were in some edgy situation, maybe on the freeway, or maybe when things really could have gone badly. And somehow, though we know not how, we were shepherded through that situation unscathed. And we often say, there but for the grace of, that was grace. We feel the divine presence in a way that is loving, nurturing, guiding, supporting, trying to help us. And that's a very beautiful thing to deepen in your relationship and understanding to become more receptive to. It makes for a much more beautiful experience of life, much more ease. Then there's, when we look at how transformation takes place, how deep sufferings, traumas get liberated so that they become part of our wisdom body, we see that that is the power of grace that does the transformation. We have a participatory role, obviously, to open up and work with these time-tested spiritual technologies like loving kindness or deep forgiveness or deep discrimination, the kind that, deep inquiry helps us to discriminate what is from what isn't, that helps us to shift. But ultimately, the shifting of consciousness happens by grace. So, and then ultimately, grace is a verb. Grace is something we become more of. We become more graceful. And that is an ongoing process. I don't believe that you reach a certain spiritual summit and then you're it. In my experience, there's no end to the unfolding of who we really are, what's possible, how deeply and fully our purest, deepest essence can come online and be embodied in and amidst ordinary life. And to me, that's the whole point of it, is for the inner process of spiritual awakening and refinement and transformation to not only help us to have a more meaningful, beautiful experience of life, but to make us the embodiment of that grace.
That's so beautiful. I can feel such grace in this moment, just sharing this beautiful topic. And in fact, one of the things that you've mentioned before that I would love to have you speak about, so often in spiritual practices, we deny the body, we push the body and the personality aside in order to try to achieve some higher consciousness. But
Yeah, I'm not into that.
I didn't think you were. In
Not
fact,
at all.
you call the body a grace delivery device.
Yeah, you
Would
bet.
you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this is part of the terrain of what I call the fourth dimension of grace, which is becoming the embodiment of grace, which is an ongoing process, right? We can't become the embodiment of grace until we have learned to surrender out of the mind and open up to the ground of grace, the blessings of grace, the transformation. But for everything that gets woken up and transformed in us, the point isn't just for personal well-being. Obviously, it produces that. But the point is for the wisdom, the love, the joy, the clarity, the noble qualities of our deep essence and our deep humanity to continue and extend themselves. And so when we take a look at a human body and we kind of come out of our concepts about a human body, like Do I like its shape and form? Has it got wrinkles or cellulite, or is it the right shape? Or if we just let go of all of that and really come into a fresh inquiry into what is this human body and vessel, we see that it's really a profound mystical system. It always has been, right? And so I understand our human body to be part of our soul, not separate from soul. It's the vessel through which our soul manifests, inhabits, and overflows itself. And so when our concepts of the body and our judgments of the body disappear, then the body actually opens up and becomes freer, more open, more transparent. And certain practices help that, for example, in Taoist understanding and in obviously yogic understanding, there's profound systems for what can help open and refine the subtle body, and Tibetan Buddhism also. But when you really look at it, it's like, wow, this is a vessel. And I experience it for myself as if our three primary centers, our deep belly, or what's often called our cuff center, our heart center, and our head center, that really are like three spouts of a fountain. And so when the whole system refines and opens up, there's a sense of that grace or divine presence can just emerge through the body, and there's a transmission without us having to necessarily say anything of, impeccable, beautiful being and action. When the grace flows through our heart, there's all the heart qualities are liberated, like compassion, loving kindness, joy, curiosity, courage, right? All emerge out of the heart. And the head center becomes pure perception, deep understanding, insight, the capacity to hold paradoxes and discriminate what needs to be said and done in any given moment. And so, I'm talking about something that happens as we advance and go a lot further in our spiritual practice, and that, there's a lot less kind of clunkiness in the way. And what I've seen is this is exponential. I keep doing my own inner work, and as misunderstandings or patterns from my history or just things I haven't yet understood, right, keep opening up, what happens is there's a deeper refinement in the vessel, and just more can come through it, but without any sense of strain. And this is the big key, without any co-opting, without any sense of, look at me, I'm the one doing this. And so there's this quality of humility and just pure openness where we understand very deeply that who we take ourselves to be has never really been the doer of anything. We're really just the conduit. And all the great mystics, from Hildegard of Bingen, who described, I'm a feather on the breath of God, right? Many of them spoke to this in their way. When the surrender has been very deep, we understand, our own nature and its purpose and meaning in this world, to increase the traffic between these very refined, subtle dimensions and the ordinary human in these times. And in these times that we're living in, by goodness, this world could really do with a few more of us who are that open and deep and awake and capable of staying present in chaotic and intense circumstances, and able to let clear, fresh, wise, loving responsiveness move through us.
I'm so glad that you brought up the subject of humility, Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be key, especially in that beginning enormous opening that occurs. I like to call it the illumined mind, when the tumblers fall into place. There can be, and often is, a tendency to claim it
Oh,
on
totally.
on a personality level, to think it's about me. And yet, if you do that, it stops.
Well,
And
it's called ego appropriation. And then I think it's part of what we all need to understand about our humanity. And I think this happens, and I agree with you completely about how crucial humility is. I want to say a bit more about that. But I think why ego appropriation happens, few of us escape that trap, is that as young children, which is when our ego is being structured into a personality that is not wrong, it's not a mistake, it's we all go through it, so it's obviously just the first stage of our human life. You know, we learn by imitating those around us. We learn to speak. We learn to tie our shoelaces. We learn this is the way you use a knife and fork. You know, we learn everything by imitating those around us. And so it's quite an innocent phenomena, really, how it's just the nature of ego to just absorb everything and claim it for its own. And then it can become quite problematic. You know, I see this a lot with people having an awakening experience, which really is, okay, the veils of their mind have expanded and they now taste the unity of being in a way they hadn't before. And they understand, oh gosh, I'm really not separate, or I really am the love. And then the ego comes back and goes, oh yeah, now you're special, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we just have to forgive that part of our ego, but be on the lookout for it, because the impact of not understanding that and claiming the realization for our own personal credit, you know, usually does not have a good effect for anyone, you know. And so I think that's why all of the great mystical traditions emphasize the importance of humility, and they do it in different ways, you know. But I often think of humility as simultaneously evidence that there is some real awakening that has happened in a soul, because the deeper we awaken, the more humble we become. The more we get it, gosh, I've not been the doer of anything. Nothing is really to my personal credit. It's all grace.
Mm.
But so it's evidence that there's some real maturation that's happened. But I think it's also, so it's like the fragrance of a mature soul, right? One of the beautiful fragrances of mature soul. But I also think it's a virtue that we can cultivate. And it's a good virtue to cultivate, to remember, but to understand that true humility isn't, you know, batting away compliments or, oh no, I'm not worthy. It's not imitating or, you know, taking on gestures that make it look like we're humble. Again, the ego does that. It appropriates even humility. But it's really a yielding of the deep heart and mind when we understand, you know, that we are here, but by this mystery we call grace, that has always been the one in charge. And when we see that, it's not the humiliation that our ego mind thinks. It actually is this beautiful quality that helps us just to understand the reality of our situation, as it's always been, really, that there's so much we don't know. And so this helps us befriend mystery. And to me, this is one of the most important things about being a mystic is, you know, bowing, you know, really with humility into what we don't yet know, with a loving devotion to be interested to keep learning, no matter how much we know, no matter how refined our consciousness may have become, there's always so much more. And so we have to, you know, really take up what I love the Zen Buddhists speak about beginner's mind, and stay in beginner's mind. And that keeps us in a very receptive, fresh condition that allows the fresh grace we need for what's happening right now to come alive in some new way for us.
I love how you make a distinction between humility and the opposite, which is
Humiliation.
humiliation. I mean,
Mm.
this is the ego's version of
Yeah.
humility, so as not to actually go there, so as
Mm.
not to actually surrender, which is what I would love to talk about now. Because from humility, always, I don't know which comes first, the surrender or the humility, but they come together. And you talk about this as ego relaxation.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about that.
And that's because the ego even appropriates this word we now call surrender. That's why it's good to laugh a lot, right? Because, we have so many concepts about what surrender is. And, when surrender isn't something our ego can do. I mean, our ego is just a master at resistance and contraction and appropriation. And that's what it knows how to do, is hold on to its concepts of what we are and what reality is and what we think, and not allow a letting go, right? And of course, letting go is what it's all about, right? But it's not a getting rid of, oh, okay, my ego's bad, I have to get rid of it now. And I think I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that, you know, making a demon out of our ego structure and then beating ourselves up, aggressing on our humanity in an attempt to awaken. And this is not helpful, right? And it's a trap that many have fallen into, and I have a lot of theories as to why that might be, that has something to do with the fact that up until very recently, the only models for spiritual awakening and practice we've had in any real way have only come through the male lens. So we have not had, until now, or recently, this generation, many real spiritual teachings coming through that have included the feminine perspective. And the feminine perspective understands that, our body and our humanity is part of the divinity, not separate from it. And therefore, and what is one of the most effective methodologies for letting ego yield to a deeper reality and truth is love. And so ego relaxation is really a way to let the surrender, the real surrender, happen. And we all know, those of us who've been on the path for a while, that it sounds a lot easier than it actually is. To let go of your familiar way of knowing yourself can feel terrifying. To let go of just one habit or tendency that has been part of your MO all your life can feel like, oh my God, I'll die. I mean, I'll be so vulnerable and I won't survive. And that may be true. Your familiar way of knowing yourself is not likely to withstand the grace of God. But that isn't the problem that you think it is. But it feels scary, terrifying on the approach, like it feels terrifying when we're first learning to dive into a great big wave in the ocean and we haven't yet had the experience that it's not what it seems. That when you dive in, you don't get annihilated. You actually get a beautiful Watsu rolling massage, and you're just deeper in the ocean of consciousness, and it was no big deal. So I term this thing ego relaxation to help the frightened parts of our ego not be so freaked out, and to remember, if you just soften, open, and allow your experience exactly as it is right now, because true surrender is non-manipulation. True surrender is no strategy to try to direct what's happening. That's true surrender. So it's not something you do, it's something you allow. And so ego relaxation is learning to be present, open, and undefended, and not manipulate your experience for a moment. Just to be here, to feel what is, to open to what's here now, even if you don't understand it, even if you think it's going to terrify and annihilate you, and just let grace have its way. So I'm always saying to people, if you just tattoo one thing on the inside of your forehead, let it be this: just keep opening, just keep softening, just keep allowing experience to unfold. So that's what ego relaxation actually is in practice. It's a how we just learn to yield.
So beautiful and simple. And
Simple.
It really is simple. It doesn't have to be complex.
Right.
It
Well,
has to
what
be
we mean
real.
is complex, but the actual methodology is actually quite straightforward, and it is something that we can learn. Just like, what was really kind of foundational for me in this understanding was way back in my early days on the path. I was about 18 when I first started studying yoga. And I was very fortunate. I had a real teacher then. And there was only about 8 of us in a class. And we got adjusted in every pose. And he was teaching real yoga, not just gymnastics, not just yoga to get a tight butt. And it was beautiful and very formative for me. And he would often come round to me, and I was young, my body could do everything, right? So there was a lot of pride in the body then. Not so now, but then it was, as it usually is for when we're younger. And he would come and adjust me, and he'd say to me, Miranda, this is yoga, not gymnastics. You're not present. There's no awareness in your toes. And he could tell. He'd say, come on in. And then he would adjust me. And in the postures that my body didn't really want to do, he'd say, just go to where you can go and breathe and hang out. And every time I followed that instruction, things just opened up without, and all of a sudden, like, oh, wow, there it is right there. So I've discovered that that is exactly the same when we come to these junctures in ourself where, oh, there's a door of fear there, or there's a gate of insecurity there, or there's a kind of, gosh, I really don't know what to do, and we mind makes that a problem, is just come to where you can come, be here, soften, open, allow. You're not in charge. See what happens. It's quite beautiful.
Absolutely. You know, the time that we live in, it's it's a challenging time.
Mm-hmm.
And to be grace filled, to be graceful in just these nitty gritty moments where we find ourselves challenged, or we're watching the news, or we are becoming concerned about the direction of humanity. How can we allow grace to fill those spaces so that we can be what I like to call instruments of peace, so that
Yeah.
we can be the lens through which this experience of grace is manifest in the world?
Yeah. There's a lot to this subject, and it's a really important one. But I think, firstly, it starts with perspective, how we hold those moments where challenges are, we're meeting challenges in our capacity to be present and open-hearted and not descend into fear and polarization, not contribute to the descent into our worst impulses, and to be a bridge for our essence to and our maturity and our spiritual depth to come forward as we respond to the political situation, to the existential issues of climate change, to how we show up and what we give our life to in these times where it's an all hands on deck situation. So I find that, the perspective of recognizing that those intersections where we're challenged is really where the gold is and the place where we most need to apply our spiritual practices. But we don't have hope in hell of applying our spiritual practice if we don't actually have a spiritual practice. So for me, what I find is, creating a rhythm where there is time in every day where we put everything else aside and we prioritize presence. Whether for us that is a practice of a certain kind of meditation that we do, or a certain prayer practice, or a journaling practice, or some kind of body-based practice that brings us back to our deepest center and our deepest values. We need that, or it's akin to saying, yeah, how are you going to run a marathon if you haven't been exercising 5 days a week? It's not going to be able to happen. So we need that platform of a practice in order to be graceful human beings in and amidst it in these moments where we're triggered or it's hard. Then we have a possibility to ground ourselves more substantially. For example, like many people, My husband and I watch a lot of news these days just because we're aware these are enormous times. And I'm a very sensitive person, and I find it painful a lot of the time to just see what's going on, you know? And so before I switch on the TV or open up my computer, I take a moment and I ground myself in the ground of grace. I sense that mountain of presence, which is a particular meditation practice I give to my students because I think it's the most important one right now. It helps us to ground in that which is deeper than it all and get a stable base in our being. Then to consciously turn it on and to look at what it is that we're seeing, not as stupid people or, you know, idiots or what have you, which very easy to feel like that in this day and age, but to regard what we're seeing as our suffering, right? Not you and me, ours. This is our suffering today, the suffering of the children of humanity today that we're learning about. So how am I going to respond to suffering and ignorance? So sometimes I sit there watching the news, grounding myself and breathing and praying the metta prayer, my version of which is, may all beings dwell in the heart. May all beings be free from suffering. So I think this is humanity's collective prayer list for the day. That's one way. Another way, and most of us who live with someone or married or have children, you know, sometimes we can't help but get triggered by things that people we love and live with do, you know, and they get triggered by stuff that we do that might not always be as meticulous as we might want to be. And so, you know, are we just going to act out or suppress our resentment? Or are we going to ground ourselves, get curious, what's really going on for me here? You know, and ask questions of one another. Oh, what's up with you, honey? You seem to be a little agitated. What's going on? Or, you know, I'm realizing if I've been a little edgy, here's what's going on for me. So to learn how to be more awake to what's going on for ourselves with the spirit of forgiveness, right? To not expect ourselves to be superhuman just because we're on a spiritual path, but to apply love, compassion, self-forgiveness for our own ego and that of others so that we can be more clean and real with one another and be interested in, what is this really? What's the truth here? You know, what's wise actions and words, and what are the questions I need to ask? Questions open us up to deeper understanding, and they bring forth the possibility of not having to just lead with judgment, but leading with love of the truth and curiosity. And that's always going to bring forth more insight and wisdom to our situation. And then sometimes I find, wow, I'm really triggered. And so I know, okay, take myself away, go for a walk, pray. And sometimes I pray, help me see what's really going on, what it is that I'm really triggered, what it is that I'm stumbling upon here. And then put the thoughts into my mind and the words into my mouth that are healing and helpful. And don't let me speak until I'm capable of saying something healing and helpful.
To be truly helpful.
Yeah.
We all know that prayer.
Yeah, the Miracle Worker's Prayer from A Course in Miracles. And those of you who don't know it, it's a good one to learn. It goes, I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent that which sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because that which sent me will direct me. I am content just to be here, knowing all grace is with me, and I will be healed as I let the healing happen.
I love the way you share that prayer. It's a very, very slight restructuring, but in a way that brings out the experience of grace and isn't that what it's all about? The experience.
That grace is experience of the divine presence
Yeah.
moving in and through us. And yes, I'm glad you noticed, and anyone who's a deep student of Course in Miracles will notice my language shift there. And that's partly because, one of the things that happened for me after the awakening with Ramana is I couldn't read A Course in Miracles anymore because I wasn't in a dual condition. So relating to the divine, I couldn't pray any for about a year and a half. It was pretty strange. But I had to just surrender, okay, because my experience was not that of being separate to some other that I call God. That wasn't real for me anymore. So it took time for my own relationship with prayer to find itself where I was from that point forth, which wasn't in subject object relating as a separate self to a God. It was, no, I am within and part of the divine. That is where I'm abiding. And prayer is the love, the devotion of the deep heart that is recirculating itself and deepening and making love to itself. And that's a beautiful, beautiful process. So it's good to name that a lot of people think that non-duality removes the relevance of prayer, and that's not my experience at all. In fact, it keeps it all very juicy.
Yes, I completely agree. And that's what the experience is really all about. In fact, there's something that I love to say when people ask me, even something as simple as, do you believe in God? And the answer is no. I don't believe in a God out there somewhere. What I believe in is only God.
That is beautiful. Only, yes, I gotta say, I just feel like, yes. When you said that, I believe, or I would say, I know there's only God. Like God is the basement of everything, divine presence. I would say, there's nothing but grace. And again, when we read mystics, great mystics from Hafiz to Rumi to Ramana Maharshi to Nisargadatta, they all knew that. They all spoke that in different ways. That at the deepest level, there is only that reality we call God that isn't a concept. So it's not something we have to have faith in. We can if that's helpful to us, nothing wrong with that. But the deeper we go, the more we see that is reality with a capital R. There's nothing else. And that's a very profound thing to experience because it then helps us to relate to all parts of life and all beings as God, right? And when we understand from within our heart and our senses, you are this unique manifestation of God expressing uniquely in this moment, then we greet each other without trying to, with this reverence and deep respect that is a great medicine for these times. Imagine if everyone listening to this, you friends, could feel that way about everything and everyone that you come into contact with, that their nature is divine being, God, as is yours, who is seeing their nature. Like, can you hate them when you understand that? Can you mistreat them when you understand that deeply in your heart? I don't think so. It doesn't mean you have to become best friends with someone who has an AK-47. Doesn't mean you have to agree with their perspective. But it means it's hard to hate them when you understand what they really are at the core. So this is powerful because it helps us to embody God consciousness in times where there's so much polarization and intensity and, egos just running amok in their fear, doing what egos do when they're really scared and freaked out, which is don't behave very well. But it helps us to understand deeper than the appearance and relate and act from wisdom.
Miranda, I would love to invite you to guide us into the experience itself. You're so masterful at this, and it's so important for us to bring this into the experiential realm rather than trying to understand it or trying to get something. I like to let it get me.
So, friends, take a moment and just close your eyes. And just receive the sound of the one note. As if the sound itself is a magnet that draws you back to your deepest center. Your home within and part of God. You are carried by the rise and fall of your own breath. Each breath, each inhale is a welcome. Just to be here, right now, however you are. Each exhale can be a natural, spontaneous surrender. Just letting what isn't needed melt. Like ice naturally melts in the warmth of the sun. Just see, feel, and sense being drawn deeper in and back. As if that magnet is a rod of golden light. That extends all the way down through your lower body, deep down into the earth, into the power and intelligence that gives rise to the earth. And that this golden light simultaneously extends up through the upper body and neck and head, beyond. As if you're being brought into your deepest center. Beyond thought. Beyond history. Coming into the deepest alignment with what you truly are and always have been. With what really is. Here you are connected and part of everything real in existence. Nothing missing, nothing wrong. And all the qualities of the divine are your own essence. All the love you could possibly need is here. All the peace is here. Strength is here. Joy is here. Meaning and wisdom is here. And feel as if your front body is opening up to the world from this depth. See and sense your belly, your heart, your head, opening like a giant window. To let this depth, clarity, love, peace, wisdom, strength pour through. As together we pray, thank you. I am yours. This is your holy vessel. Embody grace in every moment. Let me live and breathe and see and speak and act as the vessel of grace that I was made to be. And birth truth and benefit deeper into this world.
Let's just hold still for a moment and feel the radiance of that sacred opening into grace itself. Well, my dear Sister Miranda, it has been a true blessing to have you part of our Mystics Summit. And it's just so wonderful to always to be in contact with you and to share. Thank you so much for being part of our program.
Thank you. It's always a joy to be with you, Jimmy, and thank you for all that you and the team are giving to bring forth this summit to everyone. And I look forward to hearing all the other offerings when they are out and available to us. So just thank you.
How can people be in touch with you?
Everything that I'm up to is all on my website, which is my name, and it's spelled Miranda, Miranda, Macpherson, MacPherson.com. So just a warning, it's a pretty extensive website, so surf around because there's mantra albums to download, there's tons of guided meditations, there's audio and video teachings, a lot of it's for free. There's a lot of practices. I'm very much about giving people resources. So, and obviously then the in-person and online retreats and programs, so people can find out about them there. So that's it. Yeah. And of course, my book, The Way of Grace, and the newest baby on the block is this, which I think people are really loving. It's this, all my teachings put into an inspirational card deck with practices for every 65 cards. So probably you'll enjoy that if you'll enjoyed what I've said today.
And I know all of us who live at Namaste Village in Ajijic, Mexico, are really looking forward to you joining us in September for a retreat. Have a blessed day. And for all of you who are part of this summit, joining us from around the world, I know you are getting such benefit, such grace from all of these interviews. So come back. We have so many more to offer, so much more wisdom, and we'll see you all again very soon.